What would you do for love? Hello, my friends. On this day, Valentine's Day, today's story is going to be a little bit different. It is a romance from the Ulster cycle. Now, the Ulster cycle is a collection of stories from Irish mythology, and they specifically target one person, Cu Chulainn, one of the most bravest warriors to come out of Irish mythology. And this is a story about how he got his most faithful wife, Emer. Now, most people have their own love language. Some say it through words, some say it through deeds. Cu Chulainn basically goes on a training arc in order to win his wife. But I think that is something that we could all learn from. Today's story, my friends, is the wooing of Emer. Our story begins in Ulster in Ireland, the stronghold of Conchobar MacNessa, Emen Macha. He had a retinue of warriors called the Warriors of the Red Branch, and who was part of this retinue but Cu Chulainn himself. Now, Cu Chulainn was the strongest and bravest warrior in the Red Branch, but he was also a very handsome man. And this proved a bit of a problem because many of the women in Emen Macha fell immediately in love with him. But some of them were married. And most of the Ulstermen didn't like this. So they petitioned to the king, "Cu Chulainn must find a wife. We shall not have him steal ours," they said. But Cu Chulainn agreed with them. He didn't want the attention of these women. He wanted the attention of a woman that he has been longing after for a long time. Her name was Emer, daughter of Fogel Monarch, another chieftain in Ulster. And he has courted her a few times. One time in particular, he was travelling down to the court of Fogel, and he spotted Emer sewing with her foster sisters by a riverbank. And their courting did begin. "I see before me a country in order for me to lay my weapon," said Cu Chulainn. "No man may enter my country unless he has performed a salmon leap 2 times his weight in gold and has proven his martial skill," said Emer. "It will be done, and I will have you," said Cu Chulainn, and he left. Emer told her father what had transpired, and Fogel Monarch was not having it. No man was suitable enough for his daughter. "I will not have any of this," he said, and he disguised himself as a messenger from Gaul, which is now modern-day France, and he went to Emen Macha in the guise of giving tribute to Conchobar. And in honour of his guest, Conchobar ordered the Red Branch to put on a show of martial skill. And who was among them but Cu Chulainn? And Fogel paid close attention to Cu Chulainn. They wrestled, they fought with sword and shield, they demonstrated their work with spears. And after all of that has passed, Cu Chulainn was victorious. Fogel turned to Conchobar and said out loud, so everyone could hear him, "Very impressive, great king. But surely the best warriors are trained by Scáthach in Britain. If any man here had been taught by her, then surely they can claim themselves to be the best warrior in Ireland, nay, the whole of Europe." And this is just what Thorgal intended. For he knew that Cu Chulainn was a very prideful man, and that he would be tempted to go to Scáthach in Britain, and that would be him out of the equation. Of course, he fell for this. Cu Chulainn was determined to be the best warrior, and he thought that going to Britain to train under this warrior woman would be worth it, not only for himself, but to win the heart of Emer. And so he gathered his things and made ready to go to Britain. But he paid a visit to Emer first, saying that he will return for her once his training has been complete. She was very happy to hear this. But all that remains to be seen. But Cu Chulainn then set off. He left Ulster. He travelled by ship across the Irish Sea and headed to some of the little coastal islands off of Scotland. He went over rocky outcrops. He went past scattered bits of woodland until he came to the fortress of Scáthach. Now, this fortress was built on the opposite side of a big gorge with a bridge going across. And on Cu Chulainn's side of the gorge, there was this collection, this camp of people, scholars and other young brave warriors wanting to travel across, but they couldn't. For as they told Cu Chulainn, the Bridge of Leaps would somehow by magic knock off anyone who tried to cross it. Many of them tried and failed, and they're hoping that Scáthach would come to them rather than they go to her. But Cu Chulainn was up to the challenge. He failed. He failed 3 times. Each time, throw him off in any direction. Throw him back. The second time, try to throw him off. And then one more time, right back on his arse. It got so enraging for him that he ended up using his battle frenzy. Cu Chulainn had a special gift. His battle frenzy would transform him. He would all see red. His teeth would grow a couple more inches to bear fangs. His arms would bulk. His whole body would sort of contort and twist until he's this great big hulking brute of a warrior. Some would say this is probably one of the origins of the berserker myth that you see in all kinds of stories, including the Norse sagas. But once he was in this raged, bulking state, he weighed 2 times his weight in gold. And then, with a great big push off the ground, he performed a salmon leap, and he leapt over the bridge, soaring through the air until finally he hit the ground, landed on his feet. He had successfully leapt over the bridge, and this caught the attention of Scáthach and her only other pupil, a young man from Connacht called Ferdiad. And both of them looked at each other and thought, who is this that just managed to perform such a feat? Cu Chulainn introduced himself, and Scáthach was breathtaken. She had seen this man do this leap when others had failed, and she saw potential in him. So she agreed to train him alongside Ferdiad. And both Cu Chulainn and Ferdiad became the bestest of friends, foster brothers as well as battle-hardened brothers. and they trained under Scáthach. Weeks went by, and Scáthach saw potential in Cu Chulainn. She thought he was ready to learn a particular skill set and to wield a very dangerous weapon. The Gai Bolg. Now this was such a fierce weapon. It was a spear. Some would say it is of Fomorian origin. The Fomorians were the race of people that lived before the Tuatha De Danann came, and before even the Milesians, who would later be the people of Ireland. It was so ancient that some would say that it was carved out of the rocks and the rotted carcasses of fish and other creatures that delved in the sea. For it is said the Fomori once came from the sea. But those are stories for another time. The Gai Bolg was also wielded in a very different way. Most would handle a spear in two hands. And this is true to some extent, but to do its exceptional damage and its magic, you'd have to wield it in other ways. Scáthach told Cu Chulainn that the Gai Bolg must be thrown with your feet. One hurl with the foot. And once it has reached its target, dangerous... it dreads me to even think about it. But these barbs would shoot out across the body, from underneath the skin, piercing upwards, killing the target instantly. But she thought he was the only person who could handle it. And it did prove to be the case. And he did training with that mainly. A few more weeks passed, and there was some trouble. Scáthach had a visit. Not really a visit, more like an invasion. An invasion into her fortress by a princess, Aife, who was also her twin sister. She had brought loads of warriors and decided to continue with a lifelong feud between the two siblings. And after many, many weeks of fighting, it was decided that the two women would engage in single combat to end this feud. When Cu Chulainn heard about this, Ferdiad to some extent as well, they both petitioned to be in Scáthach's place to fight Princess Aife. Scáthach said no to Ferdiad straight off, but she was also particularly more worried about Cu Chulainn. For she had trained with him for a few weeks, she kind of knew the ins and outs of his character. He must have shown her every sort of personal thing, including his reason for being here. And he wanted him to return to Emer alive, training or no. So she slipped a sleeping potion into his drink one evening. Her reasoning behind this was to keep him at bay whilst she went off and fought her sister. The problem was, the sleeping draught she brewed was supposed to last for 24 hours. But Cu Chulainn was built different. The potion only worked for an hour. After that hour, he woke up, realised what was going on, and rushed right in. He slew 3 of Aife's best warriors before issuing the challenge right then and there. But Aife agreed, stunned, but agreed nonetheless. He went to Scáthach and said to her, "Is there anything that she covets over anything?" And Scáthach said that Aife's most prized possessions were her horses, her chariot, and her charioteer. But he bore that in mind. And so the two would face in single combat. Cu Chulainn fought bravely, but Aife was just as strong as Scáthach was. And she was almost at the point of defeating Cu Chulainn. She struck a mighty blow and destroyed his sword to the hilt. It seemed almost like it was going to be the end. But Cu Chulainn employed the mighty bluff. "Oh no, what poor fate has befallen your charioteer. Your horses, your chariot, they're falling off of the ravine behind you." And just as Aife turned away in the direction he pointed, Cu Chulainn wrestled her to the ground, disarming her and holding her up at knife point. He had won, and Aife ended up begging for her life. "Please do not kill me, great warrior. I will do anything you ask." And Cu Chulainn agreed to spare her on these conditions. The first, the feud with Scáthach ended. The second, she would be bound to him in service until his time in Scotland was up. And she agreed. She probably felt a sense of gratefulness. And the same thing that happened in Emer probably happened to Aife as well. She may have felt love of a different kind to Cu Chulainn. And during their time, she ended up sleeping with him. And the consequences of that would be very, very drastic. But their time was up. Ferdiad and Cu Chulainn left for Eire. And when Ferdiad went down to Connacht, after parting as brothers, Cu Chulainn returned to Ulster to claim Emer as his wife. But Forgal was still a problem. He had locked up his fortress tight, and he would allow no one, not even Cu Chulainn himself, to take his daughter. This wasn't a problem for Cu Chulainn, I must tell you. For he leapt over the walls. He defeated all of Forgal's warriors. He had taken Emer and left to go to Emen. Forgal was bewildered by this. Out of grief and shame, he fell off his ramparts, and that would be his death. But in Emen there was a big wedding. Cu Chulainn and Emer. A picture-perfect coupling. And Emer stayed loyal and trusted Cu Chulainn. She has only ever been jealous once in her time. But that is a story for another time. And that was the wooing of Emer. A very nice story, in my opinion. Now, Cu Chulainn is a very layered character. He means well. He always means well in his stories. But unfortunately, the fates and odds are always stacked against him. This tryst with Aife probably explains that. Cu Chulainn has these sides to him. He's an honourable man. He would always want to pay debts. He always wants to do good. But he's also a warrior. And the more primal natures of him do come to the surface. It is exemplified in his rage mode, his berserk mode. And is also stipulated in the way that he addresses certain people. And his view on societal norms can be a bit twisted, I think. Which is probably why he didn't reject Aife when she slept with him. Because Aife saw and accepted that primal warrior side, which he probably could never share with Emer. even though Emer is a very accepting person. Like I said, she was very loyal to him and did accept everything that he did, even if some of them were absolutely stupid. But that's the nature of these myths. Not all of the descriptions, not all of the meaning is there. We have to kind of look through our own lenses and see the hidden meanings. Also, another point of this story, just as a little nugget of information. Obviously, there's a massive debate as to whether prima noctis was an actual thing during the times that these myths were put to paper. There's little evidence to suggest that they did. But if it was the case, Concobar, as king, technically has the right of prima noctis to anyone in his stronghold who gets married. But if it's the wife of Cu Chulainn, one of his most strongest warriors, you probably don't want to mess with that, with berserk rage and everything. And so this was a bit of a conundrum, because he obviously didn't want to anger Cu Chulainn, but he also didn't want to look bad in front of his subjects. But in comes in Cathbad, his druid, who proposed an interesting solution. When the night in question was supposed to happen, Cathbad would sleep in the same bed. He would be right in the middle, separating both Emer and Concobar apart, so that nothing can happen. And as such, Cu Chulainn's happy. Concobar doesn't look like a fool in front of his people, and Emer still keeps some of her dignity and saves probably an important part of herself for Cu Chulainn alone. I hope you enjoyed that story. It is a very interesting one. The Ulster cycle in general is filled with fantastic stories, especially those involving Cu Chulainn himself. And I might tell some of them very soon. But thank you for listening, and I will hopefully see you on the spring equinox for the next story. Safe travels, my friends. Take care of yourselves, and I shall see you again very soon.